When Marcus left for Kandahar that final time, I held him like a good wife would. My arms encircled his broad shoulders, my cheek pressed against the coarse fabric of his uniform, and I forced a smile that threatened to shatter my composure. I promised I'd write letters, as I always did, my voice steady despite the cold, heavy churn in my chest. But the truth? I hadn't been a good wife for a long time. Maybe I never was. The realization had rooted itself deep inside me years ago, a quiet decay I couldn't ignore. As I waved him off, watching his figure fade into the airport's harsh fluorescence, I knew my mind was made up. The divorce papers were already real in my head. I just never imagined I'd do it over email. My name is Olivia, though Marcus always called me Liv, like it softened me, like it made me someone kinder than I am. I'm 34, with dark hair that falls just past my shoulders and eyes that people say look weary, even when I'm rested. For the last decade, I've played the role of the loyal military wife, packing care packages, enduring deployments, nodding through base events while other wives traded tales of pride and sacrifice. But that life never fit me. It was like slipping into a dress meant for someone else, the seams too tight, the fabric pulling at every move. I tried, God knows I tried, but love doesn't survive on effort alone. Whatever love I'd once had for Marcus had unraveled into something thin and worn, impossible to stitch back together. We met when I was 22, just out of college with a literature degree and no clear direction. Marcus was all confidence and charm, a soldier with a crooked smile and a way of making the world feel safe. I fell for that safety, or maybe the promise of it. We married too quickly at 23 before I'd figured out who I was or what I wanted. The years that followed blurred into a cycle of moves, deployments, and silences that stretched longer each time he returned. I filled the emptiness with books, late-night wine, and questions I was too afraid to voice. Was this all there was? Was I meant to live for his homecomings, for the fleeting moments we'd pretend to be a family? By the time Marcus left for Kandahar, I was done pretending. The decision to end it had simmered for months, maybe years. I'd rehearsed the words in my mind, imagined handing him the papers when he got back. But that night, sitting at my desk in a too-quiet house, my laptop's glow the only light, I typed the email instead. My fingers trembled, but my resolve held firm. It wasn't bravery, it was exhaustion. I was tired of being someone I wasn't, tired of waiting for a life that would never begin. If you're still here, thank you for listening to this part of my story. Hit the like button if you're hooked already, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what happens when everything begins to fall apart. Now, let's continue the story together. 6 months before Marcus left for Kandahar, I started living a different life. It wasn't a grand rebellion, not at first. It was small, quiet shifts, like testing the waters of a self I'd buried long ago. I joined a gym, something I'd never cared about before. The burn of lifting weights, the rhythm of my breath on the treadmill gave me a strange kind of clarity. I'd come home sweaty, my muscles aching, and feel a flicker of pride that had nothing to do with being Marcus's wife. I started working late too. Sometimes it was real, deadlines piling up at the office where I edited manuscripts for a small publisher. Other times I'd sit in a coffee shop, nursing a latte, scrolling through my phone, or just staring out the window, claiming space for myself. I hid my phone, silenced notifications, let texts go unanswered. And Marcus? He never asked. Not once. He was always the soldier, disciplined, silent, enduring. I used to admire that. Now it just felt like a wall. For 13 years, I'd been a shadow beside him. Maybe I was a shadow, period. I'd molded myself into the shape of his life, his deployments, his routines, his needs, until I barely recognized my own edges. I'd forgotten what it felt like to want something for myself, to feel my pulse quicken for reasons that weren't tied to his comings and goings. And then there was Evan. Right or wrong, he was the first person in years who made me feel alive. Evan worked at the gym, a trainer with a lopsided grin and a way of listening that made you feel seen. He wasn't like Marcus, stoic, guarded, always one step removed. Evan asked questions. He noticed when I was quieter than usual, when my smile didn't reach my eyes. First, it was just banter during workouts, his teasing about my form or my playlist. But then there were conversations that lingered over protein shakes in the parking lot, over texts I didn't delete fast enough. He'd ask about my day, my dreams, the books I loved. Simple things, but they cracked something open in me. I started to remember who I was before I became Liv, Marcus's wife. I started to want more. I didn't mean to cross a line. Not really. But late nights at the gym turned into drinks at a bar, and drinks turned into moments where I'd catch his gaze and feel my heart stutter. I wasn't naive, I knew what I was risking. But with Evan, I wasn't a shadow. I was Olivia, 34, with a laugh that surprised me, with desires I hadn't let myself name in years. And yet, every time I drove home to our silent house, the weight of my wedding ring burned heavier. I was living two lives, and one of them was a lie. I know it sounds awful. Sending that email, ending a marriage with a few typed words while Marcus was halfway across the world, facing God knows what in Kandahar. It's the kind of thing people judge, the kind of thing I'd have judged once. But living with a soldier is like living with a ghost. They're here, then gone, then back again, but never fully. Marcus would walk through the door, his boots still carrying the dust of some far-off place, and I'd feel like I was greeting a stranger. His eyes were different each time, a little more distant, a little less mine. I don't know how many years I spent waiting, for letters, for phone calls, for the dreaded knock at the door with news I couldn't bear to imagine. The waiting hollowed me out. I'd sit in our too-small apartment, the walls closing in, checking my email obsessively for a line from him, some proof he was still alive. I'd lie awake at night, straining to hear the phone, terrified of what it might bring. Every creak of the floorboards felt like an omen. I stopped counting the days, the months, the years I spent suspended in that limbo. It wasn't a life, it was a pause, an endless holding of breath. And then, somewhere along the way, I started dreaming of something else. A normal life. One where I could fall asleep next to someone every night, not just for the fleeting weeks between deployments. A life where I didn't have to hang a gold star in the window, didn't have to brace myself for the worst every time the news mentioned Kandahar. I wanted mornings that didn't start with dread, evenings that weren't spent alone with a glass of wine and a book to drown out the silence. I wanted to feel like I was living, not just surviving. But God, I hated myself for it. Every time those thoughts crept in, guilt followed like a shadow. Marcus was out there, risking his life, carrying the weight of a war I could barely comprehend, and here I was, dreaming of a freedom that felt like betrayal. I'd look at the photos on our mantle, us at our wedding, young and grinning, Marcus in his dress uniform, proud and untouchable, and feel like a fraud. Who was I to want more? Who was I to resent the life I'd chosen? But the resentment was there, sharp and undeniable, cutting deeper each time he left. I couldn't keep living for his returns, for the scraps of time we'd try to stitch into something whole. I couldn't keep pretending I was strong enough to do it forever. So I typed that email. It wasn't planned, not really. My hands moved faster than my conscience, and before I could stop myself, it was sent. A coward's way out, maybe, but it was the only way I could breathe again. I knew Marcus would find out eventually. You can't hide something like that forever, not when it's a trail of numbers in black and white. But in that moment, all I could think was, I need a way out. So I did it. I transferred nearly $90,000 to a separate account, one he didn't know about. My hands shook as I clicked through the bank's website, the screen's glow casting shadows across my kitchen table. I knew it was wrong, legally, morally, all of it. But I also knew Marcus wouldn't be back for months, maybe longer. Kandahar was a world away, and I told myself, I'm just taking what I deserve. The irony stings now, looking back. I don't even know what I deserve anymore. That money was ours, built from years of his deployments and my frugal budgeting, scraping by in military housing with leaky faucets and paper-thin walls. It was supposed to be for our future, a house, maybe kids, the kind of life we talked about when we were young and naive. But that future felt like a lie I'd been sold, one I'd stopped believing in. Every dollar I moved felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, a piece I'd lost in the years of waiting, of being Liv, the good wife. I wasn't stealing, I told myself. I was surviving. After I sent the email about the divorce, I sat there, staring at the confirmation of the transfer. The numbers looked so clean, so final. $89,472.63. I didn't have a plan for it, not really. Maybe I'd move somewhere new, start over where no one knew me as Marcus's wife. Maybe I'd finally take that writing course I'd dreamed about in college before life got in the way. But the truth? I was terrified. The money didn't feel like freedom. It felt like a weight, a secret I'd have to carry alone. I kept picturing Marcus's face when he'd find out, not just about the divorce, but the money. His eyes, always so steady, would narrow, his jaw would tighten. Would he hate me? Would I care? I wanted to believe I was strong enough to walk away without looking back. But deep down, I wasn't sure who I was without him, or who I'd become with this choice. I didn't know Marcus still had the security cameras running. If I had, I never would have let Evan step foot in that house. That house, the one Marcus built with his own hands, laying every brick, sanding every beam, pouring himself into it like it was his heart outside his chest. I didn't think he'd check the footage, not from thousands of miles away in Kandahar. I didn't think he'd treat it like a military operation, analyzing every frame for threats, for betrayal. But I deserved to be watched. I'd betrayed him, and I knew it, deep in my gut where guilt twisted like a knife. Till I didn't stop. Evan came into my life like a spark in a dry field, sudden, reckless, and impossible to ignore. He was a colleague at the bookstore where I worked part-time, a quiet man with wire-rimmed glasses and a laugh that felt like sunlight after years of gray. We started with coffee breaks, then late-night talks about novels and dreams we'd both buried. I told myself it was nothing, just friendship, but every touch lingered too long, every glance carried too much. When Marcus left for his latest deployment, the space he left behind felt like permission. Evan came over one night with a bottle of wine and a dog-eared copy of The Great Gatsby. We talked until dawn, and when he kissed me, I didn't pull away. Cameras caught it all. I found out later, when Marcus's email arrived, not a reply to my divorce request, but a cold, calculated message with timestamps and grainy screenshots. Me and Evan on the couch. Me and Evan in the kitchen. Me and Evan, tangled in a moment I'd convinced myself was mine to take. My stomach dropped as I scrolled through the images, each one a silent accusation. Marcus hadn't just watched, he'd studied. He'd cataloged my betrayal like he was mapping enemy territory. I should have been furious at the invasion, but all I felt was shame. Not for loving Evan, but for pretending I was still the woman Marcus married. I kept going with Evan anyway. Maybe it was defiance, or maybe I was just too far gone to care. We met at his place after that, away from the cameras, away from the house that felt more like Marcus's than mine. Every time I saw Evan, I told myself I was reclaiming something, my freedom, my heart, my life. But late at night, alone, I'd see Marcus's face in my mind, his crooked grin fading into the soldier's stare from those screenshots. I'd betrayed more than our marriage. I'd betrayed the man who'd once made me feel safe. And yet, I couldn't stop. Evan was my escape, my proof that I could still feel something other than duty. But every step I took with him was a step deeper into a war I hadn't meant to start. Everything went truly wrong when the lawyer got involved. Marcus had a friend who was a lawyer, of course he did. I should have seen it coming. He always had people in his corner, connections forged in the camaraderie of military life, ready to step in when things got messy. But I never expected the lawyer to dig up the forged documents. I hadn't even known they were forged, not really. The refinancing of the house, that suffocating debt of over $300,000, was a blur of papers and signatures. I just signed where Evan told me to sign, my pen moving on autopilot, trusting him because I was too tired to question anything. Evan. I still don't know how to untangle him from this mess. He'd come into my life like a lifeline, a financial advisor who promised to help me get control of things while Marcus was away. Charming, polished, with a smile that made you feel like he had all the answers. I met him at a coffee shop near the base, one of those chance encounters that felt like fate at the time. He said he could help with the mortgage, the bills, the weight of a life I was drowning in. I didn't ask enough questions. I didn't dig into the fine print. I just signed. When Marcus's lawyer called, his voice sharp and accusing, I felt the ground shift beneath me. The refinancing wasn't just a bad deal, it was built on lies. Fake appraisals, inflated numbers, signatures that weren't mine but looked close enough to fool a bank. Over $300,000 in debt, tied to a house that wasn't worth half that. Marcus's lawyer had unraveled it all, and now Marcus knew. I could picture him, thousands of miles away in Kandahar, reading the lawyer's email, his jaw tightening the way it did when he was furious but holding it in. Did I know about Evan's criminal record? That's the question that haunts me. There were red flags, a vague past, a too smooth demeanor, the way he dodged questions about his other clients. Maybe I saw them and ignored them. Maybe I was too exhausted to care. Truth is a murky thing, and I was drowning in it. Between the crumbling marriage, the endless deployments, and the loneliness that had become my shadow, I didn't have the energy to investigate the man who promised to fix it all. I wanted to believe him. I needed to. Now I'm sitting in our too quiet house, the same one I might lose, staring at the email from Marcus's lawyer. It's a cold, clinical breakdown of fraud, debt, and consequences. My name is on every document, my signature a damning mark. I don't know what's worse, that I was fooled or that I let myself be. The Marcus will be back in a month, and I'll have to face him. Not as a wife, not anymore, but as someone who broke everything. The news hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. Evan was arrested. Evan, of all people, caught driving Marcus's old pickup truck, the one that always smelled faintly of motor oil and stale coffee. Inside, they found stolen prescriptions, forged documents, and a whole world I didn't understand, a world I hadn't wanted to understand until it was too late. I sat on the edge of my couch, staring at the TV screen as the local news anchor droned on about the bust, my hands cold and clammy. Evan's name wasn't mentioned yet, but I knew. The text from a mutual friend was enough. Evan's in deep shit. Cops got him. Marcus's truck. I wasn't scared of the police knocking on my door, though maybe I should have been. No, what twisted my gut was something worse, a creeping dread that I'd been used. All this time, I thought I was the one taking control, breaking free from the life that had suffocated me for years. I thought sending that email to Marcus, drafting those divorce papers in my head, was me finally seizing the reins. But now I felt like a pawn, a foolish one at that, who'd believed she was the one moving the pieces. I wasn't running my life, I was being played. It started with Daniel Spencer. God, even his name feels like a splinter under my skin, one I don't want to dig out but can't ignore. I met Daniel a year ago at one of those sterile networking events for military spouses, the kind where everyone pretends to be cheerful while sipping cheap wine. He was a real estate broker, all polished smiles and tailored suits, with a voice that could sell you a dream you didn't know you wanted. He was charming in that calculated way, never pushy but always there, offering advice, connections, a way out. I'd had dinner with him once, at a dimly lit restaurant where the candles flickered like they were keeping secrets. Evan was there too, quieter, rougher around the edges, his eyes always scanning the room like he was waiting for something to go wrong. I should have asked questions. I should have wondered why Daniel was so interested in me, why he kept circling back with his offers to help. I saw him with Evan more than once, hushed conversations in parking lots, glances I pretended not to notice. But I didn't ask. I didn't want to know what I was stepping into. I was so desperate for someone to guide me, to point me toward a life that wasn't just waiting for Marcus to come home or counting the days until the next deployment. I needed a path, any path, and Daniel seemed to have one. That path was a one-way road to hell. It wasn't like I woke up one day and decided to throw everything away. It was slower, sneakier, a series of small choices that felt harmless until they weren't. Coffee meeting with Daniel. A favor for Evan, dropping off a package, no questions asked. I told myself it was nothing, just a way to feel useful, to feel alive. But the packages got heavier, the meetings got later, and the excuses I fed myself started to taste like lies. I didn't know about the prescriptions, not at first. I didn't know about the fake IDs, the cash tucked into envelopes, the names that weren't real. But I knew enough to feel the weight of it, to sense the edges of something dangerous. And I kept going. Why? Because I was tired. Tired of being Olivia, the good wife who smiled and waved and wrote letters she didn't mean. Tired of pretending I could keep living in a marriage that felt like a cage. Daniel and Evan, they weren't saviors, but they were a distraction, a way to feel like I was moving forward instead of standing still. I thought I was choosing them, choosing this, but now, with Evan behind bars and Marcus's truck on the evening news, I see it for what it was. They chose me. They saw a woman unraveling, a woman desperate for something to hold on to, and they used it. I don't know what's coming next. Police haven't called yet, but I know they will. Marcus will get my email soon if he hasn't already, and I can't imagine what he'll think when he hears about Evan, about the truck, about the mess I've made. I sit in my quiet house, the same one I've hated for years, and I wonder if I was ever in control at all. Maybe I was just a piece on someone else's board, moved by hands I didn't see. And the worst part? I walked right into it, eyes wide open, thinking I was free. The moment the FBI called, I knew things had spiraled beyond my control. My hands shook so badly I couldn't even sign my name on the delivery slip for a package that arrived that same morning. The agent's voice was calm but sharp, cutting through my haze. Federal fraud. Military personnel as victims. VA loans. The words hit like stones, each one heavier than the last. If you've been deceived, cooperate, he said. I barely heard the rest, my pulse pounding in my ears. I sat on the couch afterward, staring at the blank TV screen, my reflection a ghost in the glass. Who was I in this mess? The betraying wife who'd typed that cold divorce email to Marcus? Or just a lonely, fragile woman, too broken to see she'd been dragged into a scam far bigger than herself? I didn't know anymore. The lines blurred until I couldn't recognize my own story. It started innocently enough, or so I told myself. A man I'd met online, someone who listened when Marcus was gone, who made me feel seen. He'd talked about investments, VA loans, a way to secure a future. I was desperate for something to call my own, so I handed over savings, paperwork, trust. Now the FBI was asking about wire transfers, fake accounts, names I didn't recognize. Had I been a fool? Or worse, complicit? I thought of Marcus in Kandahar, oblivious to the email, to this chaos. Guilt clawed at me, but so did fear. Was I a victim or a villain? The truth felt like quicksand, pulling me under, and I wasn't sure I'd ever climb out. Marcus sat across from me in the dim light of our old kitchen, his eyes searching mine like he was looking for someone who no longer existed. The divorce email hung between us, an invisible wall, though I hadn't expected him to come back so soon from Kandahar. His uniform was gone, replaced by a plain t-shirt, but the weight of his presence was heavier than ever. "Do you even know what you're doing, Olivia?" he asked, his voice low, not angry but hollow, like he was staring at a stranger. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Because I didn't know. I wasn't his wife anymore, not in any way that mattered. I wasn't anyone's lover either. I wasn't even the woman I used to recognize in the mirror, the one who believed she could hold it all together. That Olivia was gone, replaced by someone who drifted too far from shore, with no way back to who she'd been. I'd sent that email in a haze of exhaustion, thinking it would free me. But sitting there with Marcus's gaze cutting through me, I felt trapped in a different way. Not by him, but by the wreckage I'd made. I didn't know what came next. Maybe courtrooms, lawyers, and arguments over things that felt meaningless now, furniture, bank accounts, the house we'd never made a home. Maybe I'd lose everything, even the last scraps of dignity I'd been clutching. But those losses didn't scare me the way I thought they would. What hurt most was the ache in my chest when I thought about apologizing. I wanted to say I was sorry, not for leaving, but for how I'd done it, for the coldness of an email, for the years I'd let resentment fester until it choked out whatever love we'd had. But the words felt too small, too late. An apology wouldn't undo the nights I'd spent silently hating him for being gone, or myself for staying. It wouldn't erase the truth. I'd broken something that couldn't be fixed. And as Marcus waited for an answer I couldn't give, I realized the worst part wasn't losing him. It was knowing I might never find the courage to face myself. If you're still here, thank you for listening. Hit that like button if you're rooting for me, and subscribe for more stories about standing up, fighting back, and finding your voice. Drop a comment, what would you have done in my shoes? I'll see you in the next one.